The $30,000 betrayal. How I made my son's family pay for discarding me. If you have ever given everything to your family, only to be thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. This story will shake you to your core. What happened next will leave you speechless. Please share your own experiences in the comments. You are not alone in this battle. The text message that destroyed my world arrived at exactly 9:47 p.m. on a cold Tuesday evening in December. While I was sitting in my late husband's favorite armchair, carefully organizing the last of the motion sickness medications I had purchased for my grandchildren's upcoming cruise, my arthritic fingers were still wrapped around a tiny bottle of children's Dramamine when my phone buzzed against the mahogany side table Harold had built with his own hands 40 years ago. I almost didn't look at it. At 71, I had learned that late evening messages rarely brought good news, but something compelled me to reach for that glowing screen. Perhaps the same instinct that had warned me for months that something was shifting in my family. Something dark and cold creeping into the spaces where love used to live. The message was from my son Michael, and it contained exactly 37 words that would change everything. Mom, change of plans for the cruise. Jessica thinks it is better if this stays within her immediate family. You have been generous with funding, but we think you should rest at home instead. I read those words once, twice, 3 times. Each reading felt like a physical blow, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with icy fingers. I set the phone down with trembling hands and stared at the wall, where 43 years of family photographs smiled back at me. Graduations, weddings, birthdays, holidays, all the moments I had documented and celebrated and cherished. In every single photo, I was there. The mother, the grandmother, the glue that held it all together. But apparently, I wasn't there anymore. The cruise, our cruise, the Alaskan adventure I had been planning, organizing, and funding for 22 months. 22 months of research, phone calls, deposits, and dreams. 22 months of imagining my grandchildren's faces when they saw their first glacier, their first whale, their first glimpse of the northern lights dancing across the midnight sky. 22 months of believing that this trip would bring us closer together, would remind my family that the woman who had raised them, sacrificed for them, and loved them unconditionally was still worth including in their precious memories. I was wrong about everything. The silence in my house felt oppressive suddenly, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the seconds with mechanical indifference, each tick marking another moment of my new reality. Tick, you have been replaced. Tick, you are not wanted. Tick, 30 years of devotion means nothing. My eyes fell on the coffee table where I had spread out the final preparations for our departure, scheduled for just 4 days away. 9 boarding passes with names printed. In bold black letters, Michael Thompson, Jessica Thompson, Emma Thompson, Lucas Thompson. Jessica's parents, Robert and Linda Martinez. Jessica's sister, Stephanie Martinez. Stephanie's boyfriend, David Chen. And at the bottom of the stack, Eleanor Catherine Walsh, my name, my boarding pass. My seat on the plane that would take us all to Seattle for the cruise of a lifetime. Except now, there were apparently only 8 people going. 8 boarding passes that mattered. One that had become invisible. I picked up my boarding pass and stared at it as if it might explain how I had become expendable in my own family. The paper felt flimsy between my fingers, as disposable as I apparently was. Seat 14F, middle aisle, the seat I had specifically requested so I could help with the grandchildren during the 5-hour flight. Now it would sit empty. Or perhaps they had already reassigned it to someone more worthy of inclusion. The planning had consumed my life for nearly 2 years. After Harold's funeral, when grief had settled into my bones like arthritis, and I could barely remember how to feel joy, my church friend Dolores had suggested I plan something special for the family. Eleanor, she had said, taking my hands in hers after a particularly difficult Sunday service, you need something to look forward to, something that reminds you that life still holds beautiful moments, even after loss. So I had thrown myself into research with the desperate energy of a woman trying to rebuild purpose from the ashes of widowhood. I studied cruise lines like a doctoral student, comparing ship amenities, cabin configurations, dining options, and entertainment schedules. I read hundreds of online reviews, called travel agents until they knew my voice, and cross-referenced weather patterns with optimal viewing conditions for wildlife sightings. I wanted everything to be perfect. Not just good, not just adequate perfect. Because this wasn't just a vacation, it was my gift to the family I had built with Harold. My way of creating one last magnificent memory that would bind us together across generations. I wanted my grandchildren to remember their grandmother as the woman who showed them glaciers and whales, who stood with them under star-filled skies and told them stories about their grandfather's love for the ocean. The research led to phone calls. 17 phone calls to the cruise line alone, each one focused on a different detail that might affect our group's comfort and enjoyment. Could they accommodate Jessica's father's wheelchair and all the shore excursion vehicles? Were their activities suitable for my 6-year-old grandson who got seasick easily? Could they guarantee connecting rooms so I could help with the children's bedtime routines? Did they have medical facilities on board in case my own heart medication needed adjustment at sea? Every question was answered with patience and professionalism. Every concern was addressed with solutions and alternatives. Every detail was confirmed and reconfirmed until I had created what could only be described as the perfect family vacation. The perfect family vacation that I was no longer invited to join. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after sitting too long in one position, and walked to my desk in the corner of the living room. The same desk where I had organized school fundraisers when Michael was young, where I had balanced our household budget through leaner years, where I had written thank you notes for Harold's funeral flowers and condolence cards. Now it held the fruits of my cruise planning obsession: printed confirmations, detailed itineraries, contact information for every vendor and service provider. I pulled out the manila folder labeled Alaska Cruise Final Details and spread its contents across the desk surface. The sight made my breath catch in my throat. Every page represented hours of my time, careful consideration of everyone else's needs and preferences, meticulous attention to creating joy for people who had just informed me that my presence would diminish their experience. The cruise line confirmation showed a 7-day Alaska inside passage voyage aboard the Aurora Princess, departing the 15th of December from Seattle. 8 ocean view suites with private balconies, because I wanted everyone to wake up to something beautiful each morning. Specialty dining reservations for every night, because I knew Jessica's mother preferred elegant restaurants to buffet crowds. Professional photography packages, because these memories deserved to be captured properly. Shore excursions to Glacier Bay, Juneau, and Ketchikan, each one selected to offer something special for every age group. The total cost, spread across dozens of individual line items, made my heart race even now. $31,847. 65. Nearly 60% of my retirement savings, accumulated through decades of careful budgeting, wise investments, and the life insurance policy Harold had left me. Money I had planned to use for my own elderly care someday, now invested in a dream that had just been snatched away with 37 words on a phone screen. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the assumption behind Michael's message that I would simply accept this exclusion, that I would absorb this humiliation and continue smiling, because that is what mothers do. We take the hurt. We swallow the insult. We pretend everything is fine because keeping the peace is more important than keeping our dignity. Not this time. I opened my laptop, the same computer Michael had patiently taught me to use after Harold died, showing me how to video chat with the grandchildren and order groceries online when winter storms made driving dangerous. The screen flickered to life, casting blue light across the darkened room as I navigated to my online banking portal. There it was, the cruise fund account I had established 2 years ago, its balance now showing the stark reality of my investment in people who viewed me as expendable. But more importantly, there were the account settings I had never bothered to explore before. Options I had never needed because I had trusted my family implicitly. Transaction controls, payment authorizations, Account freezes. Power I hadn't known I possessed. My finger hovered over the mouse as I read the description of the emergency account lock feature. Temporarily suspend all linked payments and card authorizations. All automated charges will be declined until the account holder manually removes the restriction. One click. That is all it would take to turn their perfect vacation into a perfect disaster. One click to show them exactly how much their convenience depended on my generosity, how much their joy relied on my funding, how much their togetherness required my exclusion. But I didn't click it. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Michael's number. My finger hesitated over the call button as I considered what I might say to him. What words could possibly convey the depth of my hurt, the completeness of my disappointment, the finality of this betrayal? How do you tell your own child that they have broken something in you that can never be repaired? The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice distant and distracted. "Hey, Mom, what is up?" "I got your message about the cruise," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was trembling. "Oh, good. Yeah. Sorry for the short notice. But you know how Jessica is about family dynamics. She just thought it might be less complicated this way." Less complicated, as if I were a complication rather than the person who had given birth to him, raised him, supported him through every challenge, and celebrated every triumph, as if my presence was somehow problematic rather than foundational. "Michael," I said quietly, "do you remember when you were 8 years old and broke your arm falling off your bicycle?" A pause. "Yeah, I remember." "Why? Do you remember how I sat with you in the emergency room for 6 hours? How I held your hand while they set the bone? How I slept in a chair next to your bed for 3 days because you were scared to be alone?" "Mom, what does this have to do with? Do you remember when you graduated from college and couldn't afford a car for your new job? How I used the money I had been saving for a new roof to buy you that Honda Civic?" "I remember, but do you remember when Emma was born and Jessica had postpartum depression? How I moved in with you for 2 months to help with the baby and the housework? How I cooked your meals and did your laundry and took care of everything so you could take care of your wife?" The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths and uncomfortable memories. "I remember all of it, Michael. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar I have given you over the years. Apparently, you remember it differently, Mom. That is not fair. We are grateful for everything you have done. But are you? Are you really grateful? Because grateful people don't exclude the person who is funding their vacation. Grateful people don't send text messages announcing that someone who has spent 2 years planning a family trip is suddenly unwelcome." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could almost picture him sitting in his kitchen, probably with Jessica hovering nearby, both of them probably irritated that I wasn't just accepting their decision gracefully. "Look," he said finally, "maybe we could have handled this better, but the decision's been made. Jessica's family is really excited about this being their trip. And honestly, you would probably be more comfortable at home anyway. You know how you get seasick, how I get seasick, as if my motion sickness were a moral failing rather than a minor inconvenience I had already researched and prepared for with medications and wristbands and strategic cabin placement." "You are right about one thing," I said. "I would be more comfortable somewhere else. Somewhere I am actually wanted." I hung up before he could respond. For a long moment, I sat in the quiet darkness of my living room, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly, though anger was certainly part of it. Not sadness, though grief was woven through every breath. What I felt was clarity, crystal clear, diamond-sharp understanding of exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy of importance. I was the bank, the ATM with a pulse, the source of funding for their dreams and experiences and memories, valuable only as long as I remained quietly in the background, writing checks and asking no questions and expecting nothing in return. But banks can close their accounts. ATMs can be shut down, and sources of funding can dry up without warning. I returned to my laptop and clicked on the account settings page. The emergency lock button seemed to glow on the screen, pulsing with possibility. But before I committed to this course of action, I needed to be absolutely certain. I needed to give them one final chance to remember that I was a person, not just a payment method. I opened my email and typed a brief message to Michael. I wanted to make sure you have everything you need for the children's motion sickness and any special dietary requirements for the formal dinners. I know how important it is that everything goes smoothly for everyone. Let me know if there is anything else I can help with before you leave. Love, Mom. I sent it and waited. 1 hour passed, 2 hours. 3. At midnight, I checked my email again. The message showed as read, but there was no response, no thank you for thinking of the children, no acknowledgement of my continued willingness to help, despite being excluded, no recognition that I was still trying to ensure their happiness, even as they destroyed mine. Nothing. That is when I understood with absolute certainty that this wasn't about Jessica's family dynamics or vacation preferences, or any of the polite explanations they might offer. This was about entitlement, about taking my generosity for granted, about assuming that my love was so unconditional that it would continue flowing regardless of how they treated me. They were wrong. I moved my cursor to the emergency lock button and clicked it without hesitation. The screen updated immediately. Account lock activated. All linked payments and cards are now suspended. Manual authorization required for future transactions. A wave of something I couldn't quite name washed over me. Relief, satisfaction, justice, perhaps all three, mixed with a profound sense of finally standing up for myself after decades of bending over backward for people who saw my flexibility as weakness. I closed the laptop and sat back in Harold's chair, listening to the grandfather clock mark the passage of time in my newly quiet house. Somewhere across town, my family was probably sleeping peacefully, dreaming of glaciers and whale watching and northern lights, completely unaware that their perfect vacation had just become impossible. They would find out tomorrow, when they tried to check into their connecting flights, when they attempted to board the ship, when they presented their cards for specialty dining and shore excursions and all the little luxuries I had planned to make their trip extraordinary. They would find out exactly how much their comfort had depended on my generosity, how much their joy had relied on my sacrifice, how much their family togetherness had required my exclusion. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up to worry about whether I was doing enough for people who had decided I was already too much. The phone started ringing at 6:23 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen, making coffee in the same mug Harold had given me for our 25th wedding anniversary, watching the sunrise paint the December sky in shades of pink and gold over Portland Harbor. The caller ID showed Michael's number, but I didn't answer. I simply turned the phone face down on the counter and continued stirring honey into my coffee while it vibrated against the granite surface, like an angry insect. The ringing stopped, then started again immediately. Again, I ignored it. This pattern continued for 27 minutes before the voicemails began. I didn't listen to them right away. Instead, I took my coffee to the living room and settled into my reading chair with the morning paper, determined to start this day focused on my own peace rather than their panic. The headlines blurred before my eyes as the phone continued its electronic tantrum, but I forced myself to read about local politics and weather forecasts and everything except the crisis I had created with one simple mouse click. When the house finally fell silent again, around 8 of the clock, I retrieved my phone and saw 17 missed calls from various family members. Michael, Jessica, even Jessica's mother, all of them suddenly very interested in communicating with the woman they had excluded from their vacation, just 12 hours earlier. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Mom, it is Michael. There is some kind of problem with the cruise payments. The airline is saying our tickets have been canceled, and they cannot find any record of our reservations. Can you call me back right away? We are supposed to leave tomorrow. The second message. Eleanor. This is Jessica. I don't know what is happening, but everything seems to be cancelled. The hotel in Seattle, the cruise booking, even the airport transfers. Please call us back immediately. The third, Mom, I am standing at the travel agency, and they are telling me that all our reservations have been cancelled by the account holder. That is you. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. By the 10th message, the tone had shifted from confusion to desperation. Mom, please pick up the phone. The kids are getting really upset. Emma keeps asking why we cannot go see the whales. And I don't know what to tell her. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. But you have to talk to us. The final message was from my youngest grandson, 6-year-old Lucas, his small voice wobbly with tears, Grandma Eleanor. Daddy says you are mad at us, and that is why we cannot go on the big boat. I drew you a picture of a whale for the trip. Please don't be mad anymore so we can go together. That message stopped me cold. I played it 3 times, each time feeling my heart break a little more, not for the adults who had orchestrated this betrayal, but for the innocent children who were caught in the crossfire of their parents' cruelty. But even as my grandmother's heart ached for Lucas and Emma, my rational mind knew that I couldn't allow my love for the grandchildren to be used as emotional blackmail. Their disappointment was real and valid, but it wasn't my responsibility to fix. Their parents had created this situation, and their parents could explain it. I spent the morning puttering around my house, doing ordinary things that felt somehow significant in light of the chaos I had unleashed. I watered my houseplants, organized my medicine cabinet, and started a load of laundry. Normal activities that reminded me I was still a complete person, even when I wasn't serving as anyone's ATM. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Michael standing on my front porch, holding a large bouquet of flowers, and wearing the expression of a man who had seriously miscalculated his mother's tolerance for disrespect. Jessica stood beside him, clutching her phone and looking everywhere except at my door. I considered not answering. I could simply pretend I wasn't home and let them stand there indefinitely, just as they had left me standing on the outside of their family circle. But curiosity won out over avoidance, and I opened the door. Mom, Michael began immediately, thrusting the flowers toward me. We need to talk. Good morning, Michael. Jessica. I accepted the flowers but didn't invite them in. I wasn't expecting visitors. Can we come in, please? We really need to discuss what happened with the cruise bookings. I stepped aside and let them enter, noting how they moved into my living room with the entitled familiarity of people who had never considered that their access to me might be conditional. They settled onto my sofa as if they belonged there, as if the last 12 hours hadn't fundamentally altered our relationship. There has been some kind of misunderstanding, Jessica began, her voice artificially bright. All of our cruise reservations have been cancelled, and the travel agent says it was done by the account holder. That is you, obviously. But we know you wouldn't intentionally cancel our family vacation. I sat down across from them, arranging the flowers in my lap, and studied their faces. Michael looked haggard and desperate. Jessica looked irritated beneath her forced smile. Neither of them looked remorseful. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said quietly. I canceled the reservations myself last night. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched their faces change as the reality sank in first disbelief, then shock, then something approaching panic. But why? Michael finally asked, Mom, the kids are devastated. We have been planning this for months. You have been planning this? I repeated. That is interesting, because I was under the impression that I had been planning this for 22 months, to be exact. Researching ships, comparing itineraries, making reservations, coordinating schedules, paying deposits. Of course you were involved in the planning, Jessica said quickly. We really appreciate everything you did to organize the trip, but that doesn't explain why you would cancel everything at the last minute. I canceled everything because I received a text message last night informing me that I was no longer welcome on the vacation I had planned and paid for. A text message explaining that my presence would somehow complicate your family dynamics. Michael had the grace to look ashamed, but Jessica's expression remained defensive. Eleanor, I think you may have misunderstood the message. We weren't trying to exclude you, we just thought you might prefer to rest at home instead of dealing with the stress of traveling. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, even faced with the consequences of their actions, she was attempting to reframe their exclusion as consideration for my welfare. Jessica, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building in my chest, I have been on 17 cruises with your father-in-law. I have traveled to 4 continents and 32 countries. I am perfectly capable of handling the stress of a luxury cruise vacation. That is not what I meant. What you meant, I interrupted, is that you wanted my money but not my presence. You wanted me to fund your family memories while remaining conveniently absent from them. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Mom, maybe we handled the communication poorly, but we can still fix this. If you unlock the cruise account, we can probably get most of the reservations reinstated. It is not too late. You are absolutely right, I agreed. It is not too late, but not for the reasons you think. I stood up and walked to my desk, returning with the manila folder containing all my cruise research. I spread the contents across the coffee table between us, watching their eyes widen as they saw the extent of my planning and preparation. Do you see this? I asked, pointing to a detailed spreadsheet. This is a breakdown of every expense for your vacation: the cruise fare, the airfare, the hotels, the shore excursions, the specialty dining, the beverage packages, the spa treatments, the professional photographs, every comfort, every luxury, every special touch I could think of to make this trip perfect for all of you. They stared at the numbers, and I could see them calculating the total cost in their heads. $31,847, I said, saving them the math, nearly 60% of my retirement savings. Money I had planned to use for my own care as I age, now invested in creating memories for people who decided I wasn't worth remembering. Mom, we never said you weren't worth remembering, Michael protested weakly. You didn't have to say it. You demonstrated it perfectly when you excluded me from the experience I had created for all of us. Jessica leaned forward, her mask of politeness finally slipping. Eleanor, I understand you are upset, but canceling everything out of spite isn't going to solve anything. You are punishing the children for an adult disagreement. I am not punishing anyone, I replied calmly. I am simply choosing not to fund experiences that don't include me. The children's disappointment is regrettable, but it is not my responsibility to subsidize their joy while absorbing their rejection. So what now? Michael asked. You are just going to let $30,000 go down the drain? Oh, the money isn't going anywhere, I said, allowing myself a small smile. I am going to use it exactly as intended for a family cruise to Alaska. Just a different family. I told them about my church friends, about the 8 women who had spent their lives giving to others without receiving recognition or appreciation in return. I told them about Ruth, who hadn't left Maine in 15 years because her children were too busy to visit, let alone invite her anywhere. About Margaret, whose daughter took her for granted until she needed a babysitter. About Frances, who had raised 5 children and 14 grandchildren, but was rarely included in family celebrations. These women have earned a beautiful vacation, I concluded. They have spent their lives making others happy, and now it is their turn to experience joy. The look on Jessica's face was priceless. You are taking strangers on our cruise. I am taking friends on my cruise, I corrected. Friends who value my company as much as my generosity. Michael stood up abruptly. This is insane, Mom. You are choosing strangers over your own family. I am choosing people who see me as more than a source of funding. People who include me rather than exclude me. People who appreciate my presence instead of viewing it as a complication. They left soon after, but not before Jessica made one final attempt at manipulation. I hope you realize that this decision will affect your relationship with your grandchildren, she said. her voice cold with barely controlled anger. They are going to remember that their grandmother chose spite over family. They are going to remember that their parents excluded their grandmother from a family vacation she had planned and paid for. I corrected, and hopefully they will learn something important about treating people with respect and dignity. After they left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from avoiding conflict, but the solid peace that comes from standing up for yourself. Not the uncertain peace of hoping for better treatment, but the confident peace of demanding it. I picked up my phone and called Ruth, the first woman on my list of cruise companions. Ruth, it is Eleanor Walsh from church. How would you feel about taking a cruise to Alaska next week? Yes, I am serious. No, you don't need to pay for anything. Just pack warm clothes and a sense of adventure. By evening, I had made 8 phone calls and received 8 enthusiastic responses. 8 women who had been overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted by their families. 8 women who understood what it meant to give everything and receive indifference in return. 8 women who deserved to see glaciers and whales and northern lights. 8 women who would appreciate the gift they were being given because they understood its true value. The next morning, while my original family was presumably dealing with the aftermath of their canceled vacation, I was on the phone with the cruise line, booking 8 new suites for the following week's sailing. The agent was incredibly helpful, apologizing for the confusion with the previous booking and ensuring that everything would be perfect for my group. These ladies have been looking forward to this trip for a very long time, I told her, which was true in ways she couldn't imagine. 3 days later, I stood in the Seattle cruise terminal with 7 remarkable women, all of us wearing matching scarves I had bought as a surprise. Not because anyone required us to match, but because we wanted to look like we belonged together. Because we did belong together. The Aurora Princess was even more magnificent than the photographs had suggested. Our suites were spacious and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Pacific Ocean like living artwork. The first evening, we gathered on my private balcony for champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries, toasting to friendship, to new adventures, to second chances, and to the radical act of putting ourselves first. I feel guilty, Margaret confessed, settling into a plush deck chair with her glass of champagne. My son called 4 times today, asking when I would be home to watch my granddaughter. And what did you tell him? Ruth asked. I told him I would be home when I was good and ready, and not a moment before. We all laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. It was revolutionary. Each day of our cruise brought new wonders. We watched glaciers calving into the sea, massive chunks of ancient ice thundering into the water like nature's own standing ovation. We spotted humpback whales breaching in the distance, their enormous bodies defying gravity for one glorious moment before disappearing beneath the waves. We took helicopter tours over snow-capped mountains that stretched to the horizon like sleeping giants. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments, over morning coffee on our balconies, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, during afternoon tea in the ship's elegant conservatory, sharing stories we had never told anyone. In the evenings, gathered around our table in the specialty restaurant, laughing until our sides ached and our cheeks hurt. We talked about our children, but not with the martyred sighs we had grown accustomed to. We talked about them honestly, acknowledging the ways they had disappointed us while still loving them fiercely. We talked about our late husbands, sharing memories both sweet and bitter. We talked about our dreams deferred, our regrets, our hopes for whatever time we had left. And slowly, something healing happened. We stopped apologizing for taking up space. We stopped feeling guilty for enjoying ourselves. We stopped waiting for permission to be happy. On our 4th night, as we sailed through the inside passage under a canopy of stars more brilliant than any city dweller could imagine, I stood on my balcony and thought about the family that was supposed to be with me. Michael and Jessica and the grandchildren, probably home by now, probably dealing with the financial and emotional aftermath of their failed vacation. I felt sad for the children, who had been denied an experience that would have enriched their lives immeasurably. But I felt no guilt about my decision, no regret about the path I had chosen. They had made their choice when they decided to exclude me. I had simply made mine when I refused to fund my own rejection. My phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. "The kids keep asking when you are coming home. Emma drew you a picture of the whales we were supposed to see together." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the familiar tug of maternal guilt warring with my newfound sense of self-respect. Then I typed back, "I am home right now. I am with people who value my company as much as my generosity. Give Emma my love." On our final night, we gathered on the ship's observation deck to watch for the northern lights. The crew had announced that conditions were perfect, clear skies, new moon, minimal light pollution. We bundled up in blankets and settled into deck chairs, hot toddies warming our hands, anticipation warming our hearts. At first, there was nothing but darkness and stars. Then, slowly, a faint green glow appeared on the horizon. It grew stronger, dancing across the sky in ribbons of emerald and gold. The aurora borealis, nature's most spectacular light show, performing just for us. "Oh my goodness," whispered Ruth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never imagined anything could be so beautiful." We sat in awed silence. 8 women who had spent decades making other people's dreams come true, finally witnessing our own. The lights danced for nearly 2 hours, shifting and swirling like celestial silk scarves in a cosmic wind. When they finally faded, Frances raised her mug of hot chocolate. "To Eleanor," she said, "for showing us that we are worth the trip. To all of us," I corrected, "for finally taking it." The email was waiting when I returned home, sent while I was somewhere off the coast of British Columbia, watching bald eagles soar over fishing villages that looked like postcard illustrations. I read it while sitting in my living room, surrounded by souvenirs from the most magical week of my life. A small carved whale from Juneau, a jar of wild Alaskan blueberry jam from Ketchikan, a pressed glacier lily from a meadow in Skagway. Each item was a tangible reminder that I had chosen joy over obligation, adventure over resentment. The email was from Michael, and it was everything I had expected it to be. A carefully crafted mixture of non-apology and financial desperation. He couldn't understand why I had overreacted to what he called a simple change of plans. Jessica was hurt that I would punish the children for an adult disagreement. They were struggling financially because they had tried to salvage the vacation by booking last-minute accommodations, and now they were drowning in credit card debt. The final paragraph was the most revealing. "Mom, I know you are upset, but we are still family. Families forgive each other and move forward. If you could help us out with the debt we incurred trying to fix this situation, I think we could all put this behind us and start fresh. The kids miss their grandmother, and we miss you too." I read that paragraph 3 times, each reading making me more certain of something I had suspected, but not wanted to admit. They still saw me as a source of funding rather than a person deserving of respect. Even now, even after everything, they wanted my money more than my presence. They missed their grandmother, but only in her capacity as a financial resource. I deleted the email without responding. Instead, I opened a new document and began typing something else entirely. A letter to my grandchildren, explaining why their grandmother had chosen to value herself enough to demand the respect she deserved. "My dear Emma and Lucas," I wrote, "I want you to know that your grandmother loves you more than all the stars in the Alaska sky, more than all the whales in the ocean, more than all the glaciers in the world. I also want you to know that love doesn't mean accepting disrespect from the people we care about. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt other grown-ups, and that is what happened with our cruise. Your parents decided that I wasn't important enough to include in the vacation I had planned for all of us, and I decided that I was too important to accept that treatment. I went on a different cruise with some of my friends, and we saw the most beautiful things together: whales jumping out of the water, ice mountains falling into the sea, and lights dancing across the sky like magic. Someday, when you are older, I hope we can take a trip together. Just you and me and your cousin. We can look for whales, and I can tell you stories about your grandfather and how much he would have loved to meet you. Remember this always. You are valuable not just for what you can give to others, but for who you are. Don't ever let anyone treat you like you are disposable, even if they are family, especially if they are family. Love always and forever, Grandma Eleanor. I printed the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and walked to the mailbox at the end of my driveway. The March air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of melting snow and emerging spring flowers. As I raised the flag on the mailbox, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete and utter peace with my choices. 6 months later, I received a graduation announcement in the mail. My granddaughter Emma was graduating from middle school, and there was a handwritten note attached. Dear Grandma Eleanor, I hope you can come to my graduation party. I know things have been weird with Mom and Dad, but I miss you. I kept the letter you sent me, and I think I understand now why you went on your own trip. Love, Emma. I stared at that note for a long time, feeling the familiar tug of family connection warring with my hard-won self-respect. Part of me wanted to go, to try once more to build bridges across the chasm that had opened between us. But I knew better now. I knew that returning to their fold would mean accepting their terms, their view of me as a convenient grandmother who could be included or excluded at will. Instead, I sent Emma a card with a generous check and a note of my own. Congratulations on your graduation. Sweetheart, I am so proud of the thoughtful young woman you are becoming. When you are ready to build an adult relationship with me, one based on mutual respect and genuine affection, I will be here. Remember what I told you about knowing your worth. Love always, Grandma Eleanor. 3 weeks later, Emma called me. We talked for 2 hours, and by the end of the conversation, we had plans for lunch the following weekend. Just the two of us, no parents, no agendas, no expectations beyond the simple pleasure of getting to know each other as individuals. It was a beginning, not a return to the way things were, but a step toward something better. Something built on choice rather than obligation, respect rather than guilt. I am 72 now, and my life looks nothing like I thought it would when I was planning that original cruise. I don't spend my days waiting for phone calls that rarely come or preparing for holidays where I am treated like an afterthought. Instead, I travel with my chosen family of remarkable women who see me, value me, and celebrate me. We have been to Scotland, New Zealand, Costa Rica, and Norway. Next year, we are planning a trip to Japan to see the cherry blossoms. My house is quieter now, but it is not empty. It is filled with photographs from our adventures, souvenirs from places I never thought I would see, and the laughter of women who refuse to be invisible. I have learned to cook for one without feeling lonely, to make decisions without consulting anyone else, to spend my money on things that bring me joy rather than buying love that was never really for sale. Sometimes I think about that original cruise, about the family vacation that never happened. I wonder if Michael and Jessica ever think about it too, if they ever consider what they lost when they decided I was expendable. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. I am too busy living the life I never knew I was allowed to want. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't cruelty. It is happiness. It is building a life so fulfilling that you stop needing anything from the people who hurt you. It is discovering that your worth was never determined by their recognition, and your joy was never dependent on their approval. I am Eleanor Catherine Walsh, and I am seen. I am valued. I am loved, and I am finally, completely, authentically free. Does this story resonate with your own experiences? Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people you have sacrificed everything for? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters and deserves to be heard. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage, dignity, and the transformative power of choosing yourself. Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve.